All right, so I think our recording is all set. So Julie, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself for today's Real Talk on Title Need to Know.
Awesome, thank you very much for having me today. Yes, it is a topic that we presented to you guys because we do find realtors need to know a little bit more about these. So my name is Julie Vonderschmidt. Most of you probably remember that I was a board staff for a number of years. I have been at Title Plus for 5 years, which flew by. So in that time, I've seen a lot of transactions come through, and I just thought this might be something that would help you guys prepare, because you know that we ask these questions almost every time when we encounter them. So I'm going to start with, if you'll switch over, what's needed prior to closing. And this probably won't take a whole lot of time, so if you have questions, that will be greatly appreciated. We can either, like Megan said, do them midway or keep them till the end. But corporations, when it comes time to getting them listed and getting an offer put together, you're going to want to collect the articles of incorporation, the bylaws if they have some, and then if there is a resolution signed by the officers of the corporation designating who can sign. You'll see this a lot of times, like with a bank, if they are signing off on a sale, they themselves are a seller, they usually have someone that they have designated as their agent to sign for them on behalf of the closing. So those are the 3 documents that you're going to want to get when you're working with a corporation or a company. So I know that's pretty quick and pretty basic, but once you have those, then we'll get to closing next. Now I'm going to jump over to estates, which is the one that I think we need, definitely need to know a little bit more about. So estates are typically opened where the person was domiciled. So for example, if grandma moves to Florida and passes away there, the estate is probably going to be open in Florida. But if she owns property here in Indiana, she might have to open an estate here as well, just to help keep the documents clean and to make sure that we are following all of the estate rules and restrictions. Sorry. So the first thing that you're going to want to get is a notice of administration, and that is an announcement of the estate. And it's actually going to tell you who the personal representative is, and it's also going to tell you that the creditors need to be informed of the passing. So there's usually a notice put in the paper to cover that. Then there's also going to be an order probating the will. So if there is a will, the decedent passed with a will, then that probate order is going to give like a summary of what should be happening based on the will. And then if there is that will, we're probably going to want to see that as well. And then there's the letters testamentary, which name that personal representative. So you need to make sure that you are dealing with the personal representative for the estate, that the estate was open in the appropriate places, and then you're going to want to make sure that the title company has those, the order for probating the will and the letters testamentary. Alrighty, so those are those items prior to closing. And I'm going to jump on over to LLCs. Those are similar to corporations, but since they're set up a little differently, they do have different documents that we're going to need. So we're going to need to know who is authorized to sign on behalf of the LLC. If it's a single member LLC, that makes it pretty easy. But that person, that single member, may not be at closing, may be out of town, and may want to designate someone to sign on their behalf, in which case then there would need to be a resolution signed by that single member. Or if it's not a single member LLC, if there are multiple members, we're going to need to see a copy of the operating agreement, because that will spell out who the managing member is, the roles of the members, and who is, again, authorized to sign on behalf of the LLC. Not only that, but it is also going to give us the official name of the LLC. So we want to make sure that we have that right. Same with estates, corporations, and trusts. So we usually go to the Secretary of State site to pull the Secretary of State documents, but if the seller has them and can provide them, that is awesome. Again, if there's a single member LLC, there's probably not going to be an operating agreement, and the Secretary of State site is going to designate it as an individual or single member LLC. So if there's more than one member, there should be an operating agreement. Sometimes we've encountered where there is not, in which case then all members of the LLC should sign and/or sign a resolution designating that person to sign at closing. And then finally, prior to closing, we'll talk about trusts. Trusts can have a certificate of trust, which is a summary of that full trust. There are some sellers who don't want to share their full trust. They just want you to get the basics, and that certificate of trust is going to be a page or two, and it's going to summarize and the formal name of the trust, who the trustee is, and how they can hold title and or transfer title. So all of those things need to be collected by your title company up front so that they can review them. They need to set up signature lines and have other documents prepared. So those things ahead of time are vital and kind of keep things clean on our end so that we don't have to go back and do documents later. So I'll just pause for a moment and say, okay, all of that is needed prior to closing. Megan, has anybody had a question at this point?
No, doesn't look like in the chat. Not yet, Julie. Anybody?
Awesome. This may be the quickest talk we have. So what is needed at closing? So now we'll look at that. And all of these are going to kind of come to the same answer. We need a bank account in the name of the entity, whether it's the estate, the corporation, the LLC, or the trust. Proceeds are issued to the seller. So they don't go to the trustee individually on a trust, for example, or they don't go to the personal rep on an estate. They go to the estate of someone or such and such trust. So there'll need to be a bank account set up in the name of that entity, and then also have a tax ID number. If they're working with an estate attorney, the estate attorney should have that tax ID number for an estate. Corporations obviously already have a tax ID number set up, so you'll just want to make sure that you get that from them. And then we'll flip over to LLCs. That one, if it's a single member, the single member might, and most often, use their own individual social security number. Occasionally they do set up a tax ID for the LLC, but we find more often than not that it is, in a case of a single member, their own social security number. So just want to confirm that with your seller before closing, and then let us know. And then again, a bank account in the name of the LLC. And then with trusts, again, name of the trust is going to be the name on the check. So you'll need to have a bank account set up for the trust, and then check with your sellers to see if the trust has its own tax ID number or if they use their own social security number. That one is a mix. So we do have that happen sometimes. Then my final slide, is really in general the use of a POA. So again, LLCs and corporations should be a resolution. Sometimes they do use POAs, and we have to review those to see if those are even going to be usable in the case of the entity, because the entity documents, whether it's an LLC or a corporation, are going to let you know if that's an allowed document or not, power of attorney. So if not, then we'll go with the corporate resolution or an LLC resolution designating who the signer will be at closing. For an estate, you cannot use the power of attorney for the personal rep of the estate. The personal representative needs to be the person signing the documents at closing. And then with trusts, not all trusts allow for the use of a POA. So again, that's something that you'll want to if you're working with the trust, get the trust documents to your title company early on so they have that chance to review. And then if it's allowed, work with your title company and make sure that the POA, either they've already executed or have your title company prepare one. So that's taken care of prior to closing. So that is a case by case with trusts. So that you'll need to talk with your individual trustees to make sure that they know what they are allowed to do with their trust. So, wow, that was quick. But really, again, this was just a general overview, whether you work with Title Plus or another title company in the area, out of the area, the requests from them are going to be the same. They're going to need to see the documents ahead of time for review. It's very helpful. That way, again, signature lines are set up. You, as a listing agent, know that you are dealing with and getting all the signatures that you need when you've already had a chance to look at these as well. So again, I am happy to answer any questions. I realize that was pretty quick,
Julie,
but I can't really provide legal advice. I can just tell you what we need for title.
Julie, would we be able to share your PowerPoint with the attendees?
Oh, please.
Okay. Yeah, I can send that to everyone who attended.
Mm-hmm.
Cindy, you have a question?
Oh, I have at least two questions. One is, when I've sold a lot of homes that were in estates,
Mm-hmm.
and I've always gotten the letters testamentary, and I've always provided those to you, to the title company. I don't think anybody's ever asked me for a copy of the will, and I saw will on your list of things that you need. Have you been taking the initiative and going to the attorney and getting that, or?
Well, I think
providing it. Am I doing
yeah.
it?
I think if you start with the letters testamentary and the other documents, and if you're working with an estate attorney, then we probably don't need to see the will. I would start with the documents that the other documents, the letters testamentary, and stuff, and then let the title company review those. And if we need the will, we'll probably ask for it. If you already have the will and want to go ahead and send it, it doesn't hurt to give us more than we need ahead of time, because we can ignore what we don't need. It's the stuff we don't get that we wish we had. So I would say err on the side of giving your title company a little more than that you think they might need, and they can let you know if there's anything additional, or if no, we don't need that, so we don't need to review it necessarily.
Okay.
All right.
It's okay if I ask my other question?
Please do.
Okay. Bank accounts. We all know there has to be a bank account in the name, but does the administrator for the estate or the whatever, once it's established that is the proper person, do they not have the right to request a check in the name of the estate rather than wiring of funds to an account?
That is, they may certainly ask for, take a check with them. In that case, then, you know, we don't necessarily need the bank information, but if they're sending a wire, that's when we would need to see, or at least have, you know, our form filled out with the bank information. But the check, if it's issued as a check, it would be to the estate. So again, just wouldn't have like personal representative name on there. It would be the estate of,
Julie, there's a question in the chat that asks, how far into the process, how far in advance of closing do you need the documents so that you can complete your paperwork?
Well, ideally before we send out the commitment. So as early in the process as possible. So if you are the listing agent and you're submitting the offer to us to start the order, go ahead and send what you've got. And like I said, then title can start to review that. And if they have any questions, follow up with you and request additional documents. But usually, I mean, if I'm going to send out a commitment, I will usually remind, if I see that we don't have some documents in the file, when I send it out, I usually remind the agents I'm in need of this. So again, when you send that commitment, or when I send that commitment, I'm usually already looking at the closing documents and verifying all those signatures. So if I see blanks, then that tells me that we need a document. But the sooner the better is the short answer.
And really, we need those documents, we realtors. Otherwise, how do we know whether we've got the power, the person who's got the power signing the documents?
I love that answer too, Cindy. Yes, technically you ought to have them just a CYA yourself. You want to make sure that you've got, again, is there one signature needed for a trust, or are there 2 or 3? So yeah, you want to know that ahead of time as well. So it's in your own best interest to get those documents and go over them with your seller to make sure that they know, okay, well, I see that you signed, but I see here that there's a second person listed and you're not listed as able to act independently. So we need to get that other signature. Yeah, I would say that you want to have it before you even finalize your listing.
Anyone else have any questions that they can think of while we've got Julie?
Something else.
Sure.
Kind of a sidetrack thing, but
Yeah.
I had a real learning experience within the last 12 months involving a transfer on death deed.
Oops, Cindy, you froze up.
A transfer on death deed?
Oh,
Am I still frozen?
what about, you cut out and froze up.
Oh,
Yeah, now I can hear you.
I had a learning experience involving a transfer on death deed. I would not want to repeat it. I learned well the first time, but do you want to say a word about that? It's something that was brand new.
We don't typically, we don't draft those. We don't do transfer on death deeds. We do encounter them once, they've been executed and recorded, and say the seller is now trying to sell and they're the person who it was transferred to. Usually what we do then is we need to do an affidavit of transfer on death, and that notifies the recorder's office and everybody that the person who was in title is now deceased. There's a copy of their death certificate usually attached to that affidavit, and then that transfers the property into the transferee's name. And then they can go about signing.
And the little detail, the person the grantor in the transfer on death deed actually has to be alive when that deed is recorded, the way I understand it.
That is true too.
Yeah, that was a little wrinkle that I wasn't aware of, and there was a scramble, believe me.
I bet. Yeah, I think I've encountered that one once myself. So yeah, everybody wants to keep their documents, tucked away and then get them recorded later. Then sometimes that causes a bigger problem.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording just in case anybody has anything additional they want to ask.